spoken, so I hope you can all hear me. Should I take it? This just looks more elegant. That's it. No, it's okay, I can start speaking. The thing about politicians is you can't stop them speaking. It's an occupational hazard. I'd like to thank all of you for being here. And it's really a pleasure to be here at this Global Educators Fest. In this beautiful city of Udaipur, which is known for its history and its valor and its honor. And I can really think of no more beautiful surroundings for all of us to congregate today. I'm going to be speaking on education, but I'm really going to be speaking in a circuitous manner about education because I feel that all of you in the ingestion of didactic method of allopathic education, all of you have a major leg up on me. So really what I want to speak about is how education is really a result of prevalent circumstance, of atmosphere, of so many different conditions which really have their teeth in each other. And I want to start by talking about innovation. You know, when Flipkart was acquired by Walmart, I started reading about it. And I was working on a paper on innovation, and it struck. Are you okay? And it struck me that Amazon was #1 in India on the day they debuted. So I thought, how is this possible? How is it possible that a company comes in from abroad and on day one, they obliterate all their competition? Jeff Bezos, he said, you know, 8 years before we launched in India, we hired 3,000 people in India. 8 years before. And the job of those people was just to do market research. And he said that they were not in places like Delhi and Mumbai. They were in places like Rourkela and Agartala and Jamshedpur and Jhansi. And their job was just to tell us how India would view us and how India was going to respond in these changing times that we live in. He said 5 things were told to me. The most important of them was 1, people do have smartphones in India, but they are cheap smartphones. So they don't really have a lot of bandwidth, they don't really have a lot of capacity to download heavy-duty apps. So make a very light, small app which doesn't crash the phone, because the first time a poor man's phone crashes because he loads your app is the last time he will ever load your app. The second, he said, was that the trader community of India is very strong and very united and has a very vocal manner. So if you're seen as some kind of foreign invader coming to destroy their livelihood, they will take to the streets and you will be booted out of India in no time. The third thing that he said was that unfortunately, every time somebody is coming from abroad, they've taken a lot of time to amalgamate into the system for the simple reason that they haven't understood the economic structure. And the fourth thing was that the country is very vast and very diverse, and therefore you need to get around because it's not always motorable. So he said, 1, I tied up with the Indian Post Office so that to get my product in 1 day. Secondly, I made the lightest app of Amazon anywhere in the world. Third, he said I started something called Amazon Tatkal, which is in 30 minutes, any company in India can upload their stuff onto Amazon to sell or do business. 4, and this is the most important of them all, my daughter, who's going to turn 4 on the 18th of August, said to me, she said, why don't you take me to the market? Now I live in Jodhpur in Delhi and the market is not very big. But the idea of going to the market sometimes is better than the actual experience. And so I said, come, I'll take you. And when we went to the market, of course, there wasn't a lot to buy. But she said, Papa, I want a lollipop. I said, all right. So I said to the gentleman, I said, do you have any lollipops? And he said, no, I have no lollipops, but I will order it on Amazon. Now, I was amazed that this corner stop guy, who should be intimidated by the advent of Amazon, should be saying to me, I'll order it on Amazon. So I said to him in Hindi, I said, भाई साहब, आपका तो सारा व्यापारी ये लोग छीन रहे हैं, तो आप उनसे order करेंगे उनके द्वारा. He said, we get a 5% handling fee from Amazon for every bit of business that we do. So we're actually incentivized to increase their volume. And I thought this was a one-off thing. But soon you're going to find in places like Riva and Balia and Jhalawar and all over the place that common marketplaces are going to be doing business in this manner because it suits their economic purpose to do so. And so I was amazed by, how companies have been reinventing themselves to suit the ecosystem of our time, and why really we haven't been able to do the same. I was in China to give a lecture last year, and we were in Hangzhou, so we went to see Alibaba, which is headquartered there. Tell me something about how you structured your business and your app differently. And he said that, China is a very hierarchical society. So the elders still decide what happens in a house. So my app is really the only app in the world which actually is geared not towards the millennials, but is geared towards people over 55 years of age. He said, because I found that they take the economic decisions in a house, and the millennials, although having a mind of their own, didn't have the economic fortitude to really decide what to get. See, innovation is about implementing and creating new ideas to add value to any organization. But that organization can be a society, it can be a country, it doesn't have to only be a company. It's about staying relevant in the face of constant change. Why has innovation not been successful in India? The first reason is because of the lack of research and development. So just to quote you from UNESCO, India has 366 R&D personnel per million people. If you compare that to China, which is 3,000, and Germany, which is almost 9,000. We were considered, actually, strangely enough, much better as an innovation economy than we are. So according to the Global Innovation Index survey, in 1960, we were number 17 on the list. China was number 90. Now we're number 60 and China's, well, you know what it is. So the fact is that, when you look at any project, whether it's a government project, whether it's a private project, if you don't understand market sophistication, if you don't have a basic level of awareness, and that unfortunately or fortunately comes through research and development. How much does India spend on innovation? So India spends 0.6% of GDP on innovation, right? Innovation to me is the link between the present and the future. So Israel, South Korea spend 5%. But even countries next to us like Bangladesh spend 2.5%. And they spend most of it actually on textile innovation because they've decided that that is where the jobs are for their country at hand. And I was just wondering why this had happened. You see, why in India, so it's very interesting. We have the largest amount of startups in the world outside of America, but we have a 91% failure rate of all startups. But what is the reason? The reason, very honestly, is a psychological inability to be patient. So in India, the reason that startups in India failed, or most of them failed, was because every person that invests money wants to get their money out between 2 and 4 years. Whereas the gestation period in Japan, in South Korea, in America, in Europe is about 10 years. So when you invest, you're not calling the guy every day, say, "Bhaiya, mere paise ka kya ho gaya, mere paise ka kya ho gaya," which is not the way to grow any kind of business. The most important thing is that in America, a PhD is industry linked, right? So if you're doing a PhD in biochemistry, you will be required to work with a pharmaceutical company and see whether your ideas can actually germinate into something. But in India, if you do a PhD at IIT, the only person who's ever going to read it is in a peer-reviewed journal, right? And it's never going to get anywhere. It's going to stay there and die there. So this is something that needs to be looked at. So we have a lack of full-time researchers in India. So we have 160 researchers per million. In America, 6,000. But this is not rocket science, right? It's because we don't pay our researchers. So the average salary of a full-time researcher in India is 3 lakh rupees a year, which frankly cannot get you anywhere. And in America, it's $125,000 a year, which is a very decent salary. Even if you look at the scientists that have actually won Nobel Prizes, look at Hargobind Khurana, look at C.V. Raman, look at S. Chandrasekhar, all of them did all their research abroad because there was no place to do research in India. And frankly, that should make us think. The other thing that I want to talk about is patents, right? So when you look at the World Intellectual Property Organization, 3 days ago I read in the Hindu actually, a very interesting article which said 89% of all patents filed in India are filed by foreigners. And I thought I read it wrong, I thought, am I reading this correctly? But it's true. And if you look at the amount of patents that were filed last year, so in America 60,000 patents were filed. In India 900 patents were filed. And 90% of them were filed by foreigners. I don't know if any of you know this. Who called India the Sone ki Chidiya? Everybody says India was the Sone ki Chidiya. Do any of you know who called India the Sone ki Chidiya? Where did this word come from? It came from Vasco da Gama, right? So when Vasco da Gama landed in Goa, he said this country is like a golden bird waiting to take flight. Do you know why he was talking about India that way? Because of textiles. He didn't come for, the Goan beaches. He came because of calico. He came because of silk, because of cotton, because of handloom. 42% of India's GDP was textiles 400 years ago. Today, it's less than 2%. And you know why? That's because we have patented nothing. So if you go to Mangalgiri in Guntur, or if you go to Chanderi, or if you go to any of the places where handloom is there, they're dying. And they're dying not because their stuff is bad, it's amazing. Because some guy from Wuhan in China comes, he takes a snapshot, and the next day it's made there for 1/50th the price. So how are you going to compete? And the reason is because we have not protected them by patenting anything. I don't know if any of you have seen the television show called Shark Tank, but you should. And the first question they ask you in Shark Tank is this patent protected? Right? And why are patents not made in India? It's because the average time to get a patent in India is 7 years. In 7 years, your technology is obsolete, is it not? If it takes you 7 years, I mean, can you imagine Nokia getting a patent 7 years later to, get the communicator out, or Apple getting 7 years out that their business is dead? Everybody's always talking about young people, right? It's a new buzzword, young people, young people. But wait, who are the young people we're talking about? So 13 crore people in India between the ages of 16 and 29, that's 30% of all people at this age bracket, are not educated, they are not working, and they are not trained. They have no training, right? So when you look at the fact that 86% of people drop out after class after they're 15 years old in Indian schools, so you have a great enrollment rate, and you also have a equally great dropout rate. So why is this happening? Even when we talk about employment statistics, when we say somebody is employed, just look deeper into those statistics and you will find 60% of people are self-employed. Now you know what self-employment in this country means, right? 30% have casual employment, so they are hawkers and fruit sellers and so largely seasonal. And 10% of them have what we call working employment. Even when we talk, I was in Bangalore, I was giving a lecture at National Law School last week, and I went to Infosys while I was there, and I went to Cognizant. I wanted to know, this is the third year in a row that IT jobs in India have officially declined. So I wanted to know that this $150 billion industry in IT, which is supposed to be the great job creator for us going forward, why is it in decline? So when I went there, they said, look, we are woefully unprepared to take part in the new tech ecosystem. So I said, what does that mean? So they said, look, then they showed me an IIT report, which said, out of 60,000 students that they interviewed and surveyed in the top engineering and tech schools in India, only 4% could do basic level coding that was required today. They said, see, today we want machine learning, we want data science, we want cyber security, and none of the schools are teaching them. So the trick is not just to scale up, but really to skill up. Because if you're teaching stuff that is obsolete and redundant, then frankly, who are you teaching it for? Because that guy is going to come out after an education loan of 30 lakhs, having no qualifications whatsoever. And even mid-level and senior level employees, it's actually doubly hard to retrain them, because it's not possible. The next theme I want to talk about, where education is concerned, is privilege perpetuating privilege. Right? And this is a theme that all of us should be thinking about. So Jack Ma actually failed the national exam in China 4 times. It's the exam you need to pass to get into formal education, right? And he said to me, I applied for a job in KFC, and there were 24 people who applied, and there were 23 jobs, and I was the one guy that didn't get the job. But the fact is, he's the exception to the rule, right? This doesn't happen every day. So, does privilege perpetuate privilege? So in Harvard University, they did a study, and they found that 60% of students have a median family income of $270,000 a year, which puts them in the bracket of the top 1% of America. And only 3% of all students at Harvard were in the bottom 25% of American income, right? When we come closer to home, Let's look at IAS officers, right? The much coveted IAS officer job. So, do these IAS officers come from the salt of the earth? Are they from the poorest of the poor? I want to tell you. So 84% of all serving IAS officers studied in the top 25 cities of India. 84%. This is when 72% of India lives in rural India. So just juxtapose that. 66% of serving IAS officers went to private schools. And 21% went to convent schools. Right? So who are we kidding? It's the privileged who remain the privileged. And it's a crowding out effect for almost everyone else. 70% of serving IAS officers have a postgraduate degree. Now all of you know that a postgraduate degree, A, takes a lot of time, and B, takes a lot of money, right? So not everybody who comes from a village can actually go in for a postgraduate degree because they can't afford to study that long. Educational infrastructure. Can this be done in India? I don't know, it's an idea. The other thing is using technology, right? So we have 650 million mobile phone users, we have 300 million smartphones in India, right? Interestingly, I don't know if all of you know this, education apps are the second most downloaded apps in India today, right after video games. But they're ahead of entertainment apps, etc. However, the average mobile penetration in rural India is just 18%, right? That's it. So you have Indian education mobile apps, you have Bijus, you have Toppers, you have all these things, but at the end of the day, rural students are conspicuous by their absence in using these apps, right? So I found a very interesting example in Africa. So particularly in West Africa, they were very alarmed because 80% of students were failing maths, right? It was almost as if they had a bogey about it. So they made something called MXIT, which is Africa's largest homegrown social network of two-way education apps, right? So they've got 2,000 free tutors, and their most popular one is called Dr. Maths. So in the evening, when people get free and when their formal education is done, they have live tutorials which are totally free for whoever wants to take it, right? And they found that the passing rate of maths has gone from 19% to 80%. You know, so I think we need to now also start looking at informal education as, you know, as an additive. See, because our education is very theory heavy, but our country is not one people, right? It's not one kind of, it's not a homogeneous entity. In Africa, there's something I saw called Tostan, which is a 3-year non-formal education, where actually a professor would go and live in a village, right? In India, what we would call a Nyaya Panchayat, about 8 or 9 villages. And what he would do is he would live and work with this rural community, and he would teach them not just English, math, science, and language, but he would also teach them things like human rights, income generation, you know, things that could actually come in handy. In Paraguay, there's something which actually they won all the field medals, all the education medals. These professors won because they started something called Fundación, which is, and if you ever can visit, you must see this, amazing, which is schools running as agri-businesses, right? So it's a full-fledged school, except their motto is learning by doing, selling, earning. So every school works. So they learn and then they make something, right? And the students then sell it, and the students and the teachers go 50-50 on the profits. So I thought it was amazing. And it actually incentivized Paraguay to get 100% students in school till class 12. if we look at something like hunger, right? Hunger, healthcare. So many of you say, what does hunger have to do with education? It has everything to do with education, right? If you're hungry, you're not incentivized to go to school. So right to food and all that is a wonderful thing, but can we do other things? So I would actually urge all of you in your own way, if you can take your institutions into, I'll tell you something I did in my constituency, something very small. My colleague, Captain Naseem Sandhu, is here with me. So it was his idea. He said to me, he said, sir, there's so many hungry people in every village we go to, and we just go, we speak, and then we do our thing, and then we go to the next village. So can we actually do something? So I spoke to all the people in my constituency who had hotels and marriage halls and dhabas, and I said, can you give me the food that you throw out every day? So we made an industrial kitchen. So every day we take the food, we clean it, we reprocess it, making simple things like dalia or khichdi, and then we give it to people the next day. And we started something called Roti Bank, where we just tell people, can you give us one roti, And now we're getting 25,000 rotis a day, and we're feeding between 3,000 and 4,000 people, because what I found was that, you see, we can talk all the big talk that we want, but feeding people is at the essence of people being at that psychological threshold where they can even accept education as an alternative. If we look at healthcare, right, so I just want to say that India loses 6% of its GDP because of lower worker productivity. And all of you as educationists know that we lose a lot of education capital also because of bad healthcare. 75% of all health infrastructure is concentrated in cities where 25% of people roughly live. And we see the graphic nature of this problem in Delhi, in All India Medical Institute, which really is the best hospital, and I have a huge amount of respect for it. But if you drive outside AIIMS, you know what I'm talking about. 1.3 lakh cancer patients go to AIIMS every year. Only 30,000 of them are admitted. They only have 36 beds for chemotherapy, so what can they do? And it's very easy to say go to a private hospital, but private hospitals are expensive. The average childbirth in a government hospital costs you 2,000. In a private, it costs you at least 10 times that. But the basic problem is that we don't have health insurance in our country, right? So 86% of all expenditure in India is out of pocket. And all of you know that if one person in a rural or a middle class background gets ill, sometimes the entire savings of a family go in that. I want to talk about justice. Lastly, just something very basic, environmental justice. See, a lot of us think that the environment is an elitist concern, right? It's not. The environment affects the poorest of the poor, the worst, every time. Two people came to me from my constituency and they said, we are brothers and we both have cancer. I said, okay, how is that possible? I thought they were just trying to scam me for money. So I said, you're brothers, you're roughly the same age, you both got cancer at the same time. They said, yeah. I said, how? They said, okay, we work in a village called Dera, between Gurgaon and Faridabad. That's bizarre. So I'm writing a book on rural development, which will come out at the end of this year. And it's an unreadably dense economic book, so I wouldn't recommend that you get it. But I went there to do some, empirical research. And I found that there was a waste treatment plant of Gurgaon and Faridabad called the Bandwari treatment plant. It's an 1,100-acre treatment plant. It has been lying defunct for 8 years. For 8 years, the waste treatment plant of two of the biggest satellite cities of the national capital is not working. And so as a result, every day, the thousands of tons of garbage that is being put there is turning toxic. And so the two villages that lie on its perimeter, Dera and Bandwari, have a 90% incidence of cancer rate for all people, including kids as young as 2 and 3. Because the water they're drinking and the land is purely toxic. I was in Nalsad in Hyderabad giving a lecture, and my friend Faizan Mustafa said to me that I'd like to take you to the Falak Numa Palace. I said, no, I want to go see the Musi River. And he said, it's not like the Thames River, it's pretty dirty. And I said, yeah, that's why I want to go. And I read a study by the University of Leipzig in Germany, which said that of the samples that they tested of fish in the Musi River, 100% of them had both male and female genitalia. When you mess with nature, nature messes back with you. So I went to the Musi River, and I kid you not, if you're ever in Hyderabad, please go and see it. It is red in color. It's literally red. And why is it red in color? Because all of India's generic drug factories are in Hyderabad, right? Hyderabad's a big generic drug capital, so cheap medicines for the world. Except they don't treat their waste. So all of that liquid pollution is going into the river. So the Supreme Court has come down very hard on them and said, you have to stop doing this, but nobody's doing it. As a result, the Musi River is the single biggest cancer circle in India, with 1 lakh people having cancer on its perimeter. 1 lakh people. And the most dangerous thing is that it has led to the rise of superbugs, which means drug-resistant bacteria, which can then be treated with absolutely no medicine. I want to talk a little bit about political reform, because frankly, until politics reforms, the rest of this is all just going to be a pipe dream. I brought in several legislations, some of them you may have heard about. So I wrote a letter recently to all parliamentarians saying that there are over 300 MPs who have declared assets of over 20 crore rupees. And so wouldn't it be incumbent upon everybody to actually voluntarily forego their salary? And if you add up all MPs and MLAs in this country who have declared assets of more than 20 crore rupees, if all of them voluntarily give up their salary, it will save this country 480 crore rupees a year, which is a lot of money. Safe is to say I did not get a single letter back from anybody, and I was not the most popular parliamentarian after that. But I kept speaking, and like I've come here today, I go all over the country all the time, and I kept asking one question, that why had parliamentarians increased their salary themselves 4 times in the last 5 years and 10 times in the last 10 years. See, it's very difficult if you're a professional, right? If you're a teacher, a professor, a doctor, an engineer, how do you get somebody to increase your salary? You beg and you ask and you petition and then you reason with them, right? But how do parliamentarians increase salary? Simple, they raise their hands, that's it, done, salary increase. So I thought that this was terribly unfair, right? And so I got up when they increased their last salary. I said, I've been an MP for 9 years. I've never taken a salary once in 9 years, never. Because I think it's unethical, I don't need it. And I remember that when I went, then one day I got a call from the finance minister. Well, now there are 2, so the older finance minister. And he said to me, he said, Bhaiya, hamare naak mein dam kyun kar rahe ho? So I said, why, sir? He said, you're going around saying that MPs shouldn't arrogate to themselves the right to increase their salaries at will. I said, I believe it. And I was very grateful that in this budget he introduced a premise that now MPs cannot do that. And now there will be a constitutional body which will decide looking at the level of work, the level of livelihood, etc. And I was happy about that. And that is why civic society interactions like these are so important, because they act as pressure groups. The other thing that we need to really talk about today is cleaning up elections. See, let's be honest, why is there corruption? Because people make money so that they can get re-elected, right? It's a self-perpetuating cycle. The truth is that the Election Commission says that I can only spend 60 lakhs on my election and an MLA can spend 25 lakhs. But it has no stipulation on how much a party can spend on me. So a party can spend 20 crores on getting me elected. I can only spend 20 lakhs. So that makes no sense to me. Also, the Election Commission has no power. It has no power to file a case after the elections are over. The only time that any party has ever been debarred for not giving their expense affidavits for 5 years was late P.A. Sangma's party, the National People's Party. And after they gave, one day later, they gave their documentation and then they were re-given their status immediately. So, what's the incentive? We need to look at this very seriously. In Norway, they do something which I found was very interesting. So they don't control the amount of money that you can spend. What they do is they limit the market for it. So they say no TV ads, no print ads, no hoardings, no assembly of more than 300 people, no more than 5 cars per constituency. Elections are 10 days end to end. So frankly, you have no way to spend your money. And I think we need to be looking at this. See, we all talk about casteism and religion and region. But you know why these things are so potent as weapons to get people elected? It's because nobody knows what their leaders stand for anymore. In Argentina, they have a system called Cambiemos, which means let's change. So what that is that every parliamentary constituency or Senate Vidhan Sabha will have a 1-hour televised debate per constituency, where anybody can, via television, ask them any question. So if you know what your leader feels on, say, foreign policy, on agriculture, on labor, on healthcare, then you know whether he's somebody you want to get elected or not. But in India, what happens is we feel none of these guys are going to do anything. So let's vote for the guy from my community because he may give me a greater voice than the other guy. And that is a recipe for disaster. The first thing that struck me when I entered Parliament was that there's no individual voting record. So how do you distinguish an MP? Everything in Parliament is a vote by whip. So how do you vote? Basically, there's an important bill. You have no idea what that bill is. But somebody will walk down the gallery and tell you, hara button dabao, hara button dabao, hara button dabao. And that's how you vote on nation-changing legislature. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? There needs to be, you go to the American Congressional Library, it is a pleasure. There are 600 full-time staff, right? There's an expert on the environment, there's an expert on agriculture, there's an expert on gay rights, there's an expert on, women's rights, there's an expert. You can ask them, "Bhai, I'm a senator, I want to speak on this, could you educate me about this?" And they tell you, and then you can take a stand whatever you want. In India, if you go to the parliamentary library, I promise you, it is the loneliest place in India. I've never seen one person there every time I've gone. Right? So we need to make a parliament a space for policy and not for politics. 60% of all parliamentarians, 60% of all law in parliament, of all bills, are passed without 1 minute's deliberation. And when are they passed? in the last 3 hours before any session. Jaldi jaldi kara. Now if Parliament is not going to deliberate, then what is the point of Parliament? Right? If I as a lawmaker, if you look at any country in the West, what will you find? That they're individual voting records. So you know whether someone's pro-environment, whether they're anti-guns, whether they're pro-women, whether they're anti-industry, by looking at their record. But in India, you have no idea how to differentiate one person from another. So it doesn't incentivize parliamentarians to add to the body of knowledge. The last thing is that, politicians will always tell you, "Bhai, hum to chunav jeete hain," and we are representatives. So how can you question us? How representatives are parliamentarians really? Farooq Saab, just one from Srinagar, he got 4% of the vote. Is he representative of everybody? Frankly, why should I take his name? I didn't get 50% of the vote. When I got less than 50% of the vote this time. First time I got 50%. So I was very aware of this. So the first thing I did after winning was I called up everybody that ran against me. And I said, listen, I'm not a local here, right? So you obviously have a vision that's probably better than mine. Let me come and have tea at your house. Let's run this constituency together. You give me all the and it worked. See, the last part of my speech is about civic society engagement, right? So what is the future of education? The future of education is civic society engagement, right? It's not apps and iPads. What does this mean? So like we're in Udaipur today. So in Rio de Janeiro, they have something called benefitoria. What is benefitoria? Benefitoria is that every year, individual people give ideas on what to do with the budget of Rio. And every year they vote on it. And the ones that get the most votes then get legal sanction to be done. This is how we need to get more citizens involved, right? In Jordan, they were having a major problem with getting people from non-political backgrounds into politics. So what did they do? They went out and they started something called the Constitutional Body for Political Development. So they interviewed normal young people from every block in Tehsil and Jordan. And they, according to their achievements, their dreams for the country, they recommend them. And in every election, 5% of people have to be added from non-political backgrounds under the age of 35. And I thought that was a wonderful